Story 1. Code Blue.
The elevator doors sighed open onto Ward C. The smell hit me first chlorhexidine and warmed plastic, a thin ribbon of coffee that had been burning on a warmer since a previous life. It wasn't my first night shift, but it was my first at Street Augustine Community, a brick box of a hospital that sat between a shuttered grocery and a pawn shop. People came here when they didn't have the time or money to go anywhere else. They healed here, or they didn't, and both happened quietly. Patel? The charge nurse, Darnell, had shoulders so broad his navy scrubs looked painted on. He handed me a badge clip and a smile that didn't meet his eyes. We're light. 5 patients. You'll take C8 through C12. Lauren's on respiratory. Call her if you need a neb or if someone's CO2 tanks start acting like they don't want to live. He turned toward the nurse's station where a metal cage of clipboards and old Cardex cards wheezed open. You'll learn the rhythms, he added. Every unit's got them. C8 was post-op bowel resection, thin as a cut wire. C9 was end-stage COPD on 2 liters prongs. C10 had a trach and a daughter who called every hour on the hour. C11 slept like the dead. C12, my eyes snagged on the room number like a hangnail. Next to it, someone had penciled a circle around the 12 on the dry erase board and scrubbed at it so hard the laminate had a scar. You okay? Darnell asked. Fine, I said, and found a pen that worked. Rounds settled into their clatter. Vitals, meds, reposition, chart. Lauren appeared. Sharp bob, sharper eyes, a respirator slung over her shoulder like a purse. Vent check, she said, and her hands moved so confidently over C10's tubing, I envied it. At 2 a.m., the ward settled into the hush I'd learned to both love and fear. The coffee in the lounge tasted faintly metallic, but at least it was warm, and I wrapped my fingers around it until they remembered they were mine. The old Cardex drawer was misaligned, and when I shoved it closed, a file slipped free and clapped onto the floor. I stooped to scoop it up and found it wasn't a Cardex at all, but an ancient ledger that had survived on inertia. Street Augustine had gone digital years ago, but judges and nurses alike hoard paper. The pages were lined like a schoolboy's notebook, and down the left side, a hand had written dates, the time 317, again and again, and 3 letters, 12. The hairs rose along my forearms. The dates weren't every night. They weren't even every week, but they were regular every other Wednesday, except for 2 months ago, when 3 entries jostled close together like train cars about to collide. Find something good? Lauren asked from the doorway. A small smile twitched her mouth. Old notes, I said, shutting the ledger and tucking it back where I'd found it. Weird how much paper survives. She shrugged. This place keeps everything, even ghosts, she said. But her smile didn't reach her eyes either, and she was gone as quick as she'd come. I checked C12 at 2:45. Mr. Howland, a retired machinist with a jaw like a vice, slept on his side, mouth open. His monitor traced out a lazy sinus rhythm. His saline bag hung clear as a conscience. I noted his output and let the door seal close behind me with a rubbery kiss. At 3:10, the ward lights dimmed on their timer to the gloaming dim that makes everything feel underwater. Somewhere down the hall, an ice machine coughed. I documented meds given and queued orders for 4 a.m. labs. At 3:15, C9 coughed itself awake and then back to sleep. At 3:16, I told myself I was being dramatic. At 3:17, a chime ripped the quiet in half. C12. Heart rate dipping, then stuttering, then holding steady, like a child practicing a lie. I was through the door before I realized I'd moved, gloves on, eyes up. Mr. Howland's face had gone the yellow of cheap paper. His lips were dusky. The monitor drew a flat dout across the screen that bounced back into a rhythm when I shook his shoulder and called his name. Mr. Howland. Sir, can you open your eyes for me? He fought upward, confused. I scanned the room. Rails up, bed low, IV pump reading saline 100 ml, HR. The bag label read 0.9% normal saline in a neat factory font. but when I squeezed the line and put the end near my nose, a sweetness ghosted the air. Not saline, or saline that had been kissed by something that didn't belong. Lauren's head appeared behind me. "Everything okay?" His pressure dipped. I said, too quickly. "Can you grab a fresh bag? This one smells off." She didn't roll her eyes exactly, but her mouth tightened. "We don't smell fluids, Maya. But sure, I'll get you a new one." She was gone and back with a new bag before I'd finished checking pulse and capillary refill. Mr. Howland's face washed from yellow to a humid rose like a sunrise no one believed in. The old bag sat heavy in the trash, its plastic cloudy in the dim. Darnell popped in, as if tugged on a string. "We good? We're okay," I said. We were not okay, but we're okay now. He looked at the trash. "What's that?" "Saline," I said. "But we don't smell fluids," he interrupted. Same line, same tone, as if they'd practiced it in a mirror. "I'll note the event. You sit, drink water. Whatever this night tries to be, it isn't." Back at the station, my locker door had a new crease, a slight bend as if someone had leaned their weight against it. When I opened it, a sticky note clung to the inside. Red ink, block letters, a smell like cherry marker from grade school. 3 words, "Mind your counts." I stared at it so long it unfocused. When I closed my eyes, I saw the ledger's slanted dates. I saw 3/17. I saw the way the pump hadn't alarmed before the dip. An old unit trick, a machine silenced at the source. I folded the note and slid it behind my badge. "You okay?" Darnell asked, voice careful. "Fine," I said, and lied because I needed the lie to get me through the rest of the night. At 4 a.m., an elderly woman in C9 woke and watched me draw blood. "Is she still here?" she whispered. "Who?" I whispered back. "The lady who pinches the air shut," she said, and the effort of those words stole her breath. "She comes on Wednesdays." "It's Thursday," I said. "Not for her," the woman said, and closed her eyes. By morning, the ward's lights were bright enough to bleach the night into something you could pretend wasn't real. New coffee steamed, new birds shouted outside. I dug the old ledger back out and ran my finger down the column of times. Every other Wednesday, 3/17, 12. 3 entries the month someone complained to administration about the Wednesday dips. The complaint's photocopy was paper-clipped behind a progress note, as if whoever clipped it together had wanted it found and hidden both at once. At shift change, my badge felt heavier. As I walked to the parking lot, sun making the asphalt wobble, I took the note from my badge and read it again. "Mind your counts." It was a warning, or a threat, or both. It was also an answer to a question I hadn't asked out loud. Someone else was counting too.
"In the city's forgotten basement, where rent is cheap, but the price is your soul."
The basement apartment smelled like damp laundry and old lemon cleaner, the kind of scent you get when someone is trying to convince you a place is clean instead of making it so. I was 31, 2 months into a freelance gig that might evaporate any day, and the price was right enough. I didn't ask the questions my mother would have. Jersey City, 1 window, painted shut, a door with 3 deadbolts. "Safe," the landlord said, tugging each lock in turn so the metal clacked like a metronome. "Why so many?" I asked. "Basement," she said. "People worry." Her name was Mrs. Kowalski, hair like a dandelion and seed, slippers that whispered. She lived upstairs and walked like someone who had spent a lifetime walking softly. The ceilings were low enough I could lay my palm flat against them if I stood on my toes. Pipes spidered along joists and tangled gray veins. The bedroom had a single vent that wheezed warm air, and then none. But it was mine, with my futon, my desk, my mugs lined up like soldiers of tea along the counter. The first week, I thought I was doing well. I unpacked, I wrote, I learned that the upstairs neighbor had a dog whose nails tapped a rhythm across the boards. The deadbolts turned smooth as butter under my hand. On Tuesday, my milk tasted funny, but cheap milk always tastes like it learned nothing from its life. On Thursday, I couldn't find my blue shirt. I am not a man who loses things. I am the kind who makes piles and then memorizes them. The shirt wasn't on the chair, or under it, or draped over the curtain rod like a confession. I told myself I was stressed. I told myself I had worn it, and put it in the hamper, and just forgot. On Sunday night, a note appeared on my kitchen counter. Please keep it down at night. Some people have work in the morning. Neighbor. It wasn't taped. It wasn't under a magnet. It was just there. A folded square, block letters, no signature, like a TV note. The kind whose important quality is plausible deniability. I worked with headphones. The loudest thing I did at night was boil water. I slipped a reply under the upstairs door that read, in my neatest print, I'm very quiet. If I'm bothering you, please text or knock. I included my number. No one texted, no one knocked. On Wednesday, I woke at 3 a.m. to the feeling of being watched. There's no other way to put it. The apartment was a cave with a futon at its lip. The streetlight through the one window drew a rectangle on the ceiling, and in that dim I felt eyes. I lay still long enough to feel my heartbeat in my gums. Then I swung my legs over the side of the bed, stood, and turned on the light like a coward. No one was there. Of course no one was there. The hum of the fridge sounded like far-off traffic. The vent ticked as if cooling. I laughed out loud to make the apartment less quiet, and felt foolish when my laugh fell out of my mouth and died on the carpet. In the morning, I made coffee and a list. Work to do, groceries to buy, ask Mrs. K about the heat. I grabbed my keys from the bowl, except they weren't there. The bowl was empty. I found them 10 minutes later in the pocket of my backpack, a place I never put them. I chalked it up to fatigue, grabbed a bagel from the counter, and walked to the bodega where the owner had started greeting me as boss, the way men do who want your small talk more than your money. That night, another note. Seriously, stop dragging furniture at 2 a.m. Neighbor. I hadn't moved a chair. I hadn't even moved my mind. I held the paper up to the light. The fibers made a cloudy galaxy. On the back, a faint ridge of letters, as if the note had been written on top of another note at a kitchen table that had seen too many lists. I decided to knock on Mrs. Kowalski's door. She answered in a floral robe, lips pursed, eyes busy. Am I bothering anyone at night? I asked. Everyone hears everyone, she said. Old house, sound travels. I'm not dragging furniture, I said. I'm sleeping. She looked at my shoes, not my face. Do you cook? Sometimes smells go up. I boil water. She said, and closed the door softly. 2 nights later, the vent breathed hot, and then not. A sighing that had started to feel like another presence. I stood on a chair and unscrewed the grate. It was old, paint thick on its edges like icing. Behind it, a dark rectangle of duct. I shone my phone light inside and saw dust in a film of gray that had to be time itself. And 6 inches in, I saw something else. Paper. I reached in, fingers brushing the duck's cold ribs, and pulled out a small stack, a grocery receipt, a torn corner of a magazine, and a Polaroid. The white border had browned. The image was my window, my futon. Me, asleep, turned onto my side with my mouth slightly open in a way that made me hate myself. I dropped the photo. The room swayed. I picked it up with hands I couldn't convince to be steady and studied the grain. It wasn't a trick of reflection. It wasn't someone else's apartment that happened to be mine. The photo had been taken from the corner near the futon where there was no corner, no angle, no place to stand unless you were inside the wall. The next morning, I told Mrs. Kowalski someone had gotten into my apartment. Her mouth pinched. How? You have the only keys. Someone took a picture of me sleeping. Do you have a girlfriend? The question was needle sharp. No, I said. And even if I did, she wouldn't hide in the vents. Mrs. Kowalski's eyes went to the wall and back like a bead on a string. Old houses have spaces, she said. Utility chases. Places for pipes and wires. Children get ideas. "Children? Upstairs," she said. "My niece's boy sometimes plays." "In my walls?" I said, the words tasting as unhinged as they sounded. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "This is a safe building." That night, I slid my dresser in front of the vent. Dramatic. Fine. I set my phone to record audio on the kitchen counter and tried to sleep. When I woke, the dresser was shifted an inch, just enough to be undeniable if you knew where it had been, and deniable if you didn't. My phone recording was 57 minutes of refrigerator hum, and once, a breath that sounded like my own and was not. The airport run had paid well enough to make up for the lull between 2 and 3, that cold water hour when the city exhales everyone it has chewed and kept. Elena's Corolla smelled like sanitizer and pine, a clean that was honest because it didn't pretend to be more. The app pinged as she passed the toll stack pickup. 8 minutes away. Customer requested late pickup. Please flash hazards. She frowned. The flash hazards line was new. The address was a pin-off. Exit 17, industrial, delivery yards, and corrugated warehouses that did their real business at night when eyes were scarce. She had rules: no bars at closing, no dead zones where the pin floats in asphalt. But rules bend when rent is due, and the fare's surge multiplier blinked like a dare. She tapped accept and watched the route line draw itself into her night. The voice in her phone directed her off the highway and onto a service road that had forgotten what paint felt like. Sodium lights spaced themselves like a constellation someone had sketched while drunk. The air smelled like oil and old heat. She rolled her shoulders and turned down the true crime podcast she shouldn't have been listening to in the first place. The pin pulled her into a yard with a single gate open and a guard shack that was either empty or contained a person who had mastered the art of stillness. A sign on the chain link read, "Drivers, text on arrival." A local number. She texted, "Here for pickup. Gray Corolla." She did not add her plate. She never added her plate. A minute ticked. Another. Her hazards clicked their metronome into the quiet. Across the yard, a forklift moved between shadow and light, carrying nothing as if practicing. Her phone buzzed. A text bubble. "Come to Bay 4. No emoji. No name. The app still said, "Waiting for rider." She drove slowly, the gravel under her tires making a sound like bones settling. Bay 4 was a mouth in the side of a long, low building, a roll-up door half open, darkness inside like a promise. A figure in a reflective vest stepped into her beams and raised a hand. Not a wave, exactly. A stop. She lowered the window 2 inches. "Elena?" the figure said, voice muffled by the warehouse echo. "Pick up for Marcus," she said, reading from the app. The figure nodded. "Flash your hazards so we know you're you." "They're on," she said. The figure's head tilted as if listening to something she could not hear. "Can you pull closer?" he asked. She didn't. "Marcus can meet me here." A longer pause. Another head appeared in the dark behind the first. The forklift's engine coughed and died. The yard's gate made a sound like a lock, remembering it used to be used. Elena's artery of options narrowed. She glanced at the app. The stacked label had vanished. The screen now read, "New pickup," with a pin that floated 100 yards to the left, into a space that was fence and air. Her passenger rating twinkled 4.9 stars at her like a shrug. She put the car in reverse. The figure in the vest stepped forward and put a hand on the hood, fingers splayed. The threat as polite as it was real. He smiled and mouthed something she couldn't hear. She looked at his vest. No company logo. She looked at his hands. Clean. Not a yard worker's hands. She looked at the guard shack, still empty. She looked up, and that's when she saw the camera. It was mounted high on a pole, stamped with a logo she didn't recognize. The lens trained not on the yard, but on her car. A small black box below it blinked a red beat. Searching. Searching. Found. Her plate. Elena forced her breath slow. She kept her right thumb on the side button of her phone, feeling for the rhythm that would wake the emergency SOS without saying it. 5 presses. The world around her tightened, detail crisping. A pallet leaned near Bay 3, saran-wrap boxes stacked to a height that would hide a person and then some. The forklift sat with a key dangling from its ignition like a dare. The vest at her hood leaned down, his face at the level of her windshield frame, and she saw the edge of a tattoo at his throat. 3 perpendicular lines like the hash marks men carve into the world when they want to measure what they've taken. She smiled, an expression that felt like cracking. She lifted both hands where he could see them and mouthed, "Okay," making a slow show of putting the car in park. He stepped back. She tapped the phone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The phone shivered in her hand as it silently dialed the only help that might arrive in time if time could mean anything here. "Just pull in," the second voice called from the shadows. "It's safer inside." Inside what? She did not ask. She cut the wheel right, the opposite of what they wanted, and drove a shallow arc that put the forklift between her and Bay 4. The vest's hand slapped metal as she passed. "Hey!" he shouted, surprise souring into anger. She accelerated. The gate ahead began to roll, slow as law. In her rear view, 2 more figures peeled out of night-like pieces of it had decided to walk. One raised an object to his mouth radio, or something more permanent. The pole camera blinked faster. There's a trick her EMT instructor had taught her before she dropped out of that dream and into this reality. When you can't be stronger, be weirder. People let you do things they don't understand. She flicked off her lights, killed the hazards, and laid on her horn, a long animal wail that bounced between the buildings and made the guard shack's windows shiver. She yanked the wheel left at the last second, skirting a puddle that wasn't a puddle at all, but an oil pond that would have spun her like a toy. The gate squealed open another foot. Not enough. "Stop the car!" the vest shouted, closer now. Something clanged off her trunk. A metal drum kicked into anger. 911. "What is your emergency?" a voice said into her ear, hushed by the phone's tiny speaker. "Rideshare driver. Industrial yard. Exit 17, she said. Words clipped fast. "I'm boxed in. They've got a plate scanner. 2, no. 3 men. No logos. Stay on the line. Are you in your vehicle?" "Yes." "Doors locked?" "Yes." "Windows up?" "Yes." "Is there a way out?" A space there between a parked semi and a stack of pallets, thin as a rumor. She threaded the Corolla through like she had been born to sew. In the mirror, a man in a vest tripped and went down on one knee, his hand scraping sparks off the concrete. The guard shack door opened at last, and a man stepped out, not in a vest but in a t-shirt that read staff in letters so generic they may as well have been a joke. He held a clipboard. He held nothing else. He watched as if this were television. "The gate?" the 911 voice asked. "Closing," Elena said. "I'm making my own." And then the world sharpened further because someone to her right took 2 running steps and threw something at her window. It hit with a crack, spiderwebbing the glass into beauty and threat. The Corolla lurched. She tasted copper. She aimed for the seam in the fence where 2 panels met like teeth and prayed that whoever had ordered the fence had ordered it cheap. The car hit. Metal sang. The chain link bowed. And for a second she thought she'd made a terrible calculation, that the world was full of fences you couldn't bend at 30 miles an hour. Then the bolts sheared, the mesh yawned, and the Corolla spilled out into night, her front bumper howling its disagreement with physics. Behind her, men shouted. Ahead, the service road curved back to the highway, a thin thread to the city's fabric. The phone in her ear said, "Stay with me." And she said, "I'm here." And the truth of that felt like a small miracle. She didn't look back. She knew better. She also knew she'd see that pole camera in her sleep, the red blink, the hungry lens, the way it had recognized her without ever knowing her name.